Good afternoon and shalom, Israel briefers from all around the world. And guys, thanks for checking in with me yesterday, telling me where you're from. A lot of South Africans. But always good to be in your illustrious company. As always, if you're joining me for the first time, I am Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief, where we take a look at those top stories making the headlines in Israel. Now, statistics show that more and more people are turning towards YouTubers, journalists who've left mainstream media streams because of various limitations for their source of information or news. So if you would like me to add any segments to the Israel Brief or do something else, please pop your suggestions in the comments section below or be in touch with us via our various social media. In the meantime, this is the Israel Brief. We are brought to you in partnership with Lay of the Land, and you join me every Monday to Thursday for a look at those top stories. It is day 515. We still have 59 hostages being held in the hell of Gaza. We want them all home now. You guys can help by making sure that you continue to raise the issue of the hostages with your communities and with your government. So let's take a look at those top stories, and we begin with the big issue, which is what is happening with the ceasefire. And as I said yesterday, we are kind of in no man's land. We've ended phase one, and it is very unclear where we go to next. Now, Israel is demanding the release of all hostages. In fact, Defense Minister Israel Katz said last night, we want to see more hostages released or the gates of hell will open. Israel has also said fighting could resume next week if hostages aren't released. We are at a stalemate, and Egypt and Qatar are looking at ways to try and jumpstart negotiations. Meanwhile, there has been a lot of criticism for Israel's decision to stop humanitarian aid going into the Gaza Strip. Now, as has been said for the last now nearly 17 months, aid has gone in on a daily basis, and just from the 19th of January, over 25,000 aid trucks went into the Gaza Strip with over 3,000 calories per person per day. So there should be enough aid in the Gaza Strip for the Palestinians to live comfortably off. What Israel is trying to do is trying to put more pressure onto Hamas in order to release the remaining hostages. Now, earlier today, a senior Hamas official said that they reject Israeli and US calls for the terror organization to disarm. Turning more locally, and the IDF has begun to release parts of its internal inquiry into their failings, which led to October the 7th. Now, some people have said, why is the IDF doing that? And it's for very important reasons. First of all, Israel is a democracy, and the citizenry will demand accountability from our various institutions. This is also the IDF earning back the trust of the Israeli people, which essentially they managed to do very quickly in the days following the 7th of October. But in order to learn from our mistakes and to ensure that these events never happen again, these kinds of inquiries are an imperative, especially for the communities the most affected. A couple of months ago, they released their preliminary inquiry into what happened at Kibbutz Be'eri and had those meetings with the survivors of the massacre at that kibbutz. And yesterday they released the reports from Nahal Oz base as well as Kibbutz Kfar Aza. They are in the public domain, available for everybody to read. Now, in 2 days' time, the current IDF Chief of Staff, Herzi Halevi, will step down. He will be replaced by Eyal Zamir, who will take on the position of IDF Chief of Staff. Meanwhile, calls for a state inquiry into the failures that led to October the 7th are getting louder and louder. They are coming not just from parts of the political establishment and from the citizens of Israel, but also from the hostage families, including Yarden Bibas, who are calling for the state to launch an inquiry. Now, the state comptroller is investigating the events of the 7th of October, but I think what everybody wants is for the Prime Minister and his government to accept responsibility and to launch an inquiry. As yet, the Prime Minister still has not accepted responsibility, a fact that is causing a lot of concern for many in Israel. Shin Bet Chief Ronen Bar says that he will leave his post once all the hostages have returned. He has also called for a state inquiry, saying that in order for him to move on and to hand his baton onto one of his deputies, he says there needs to be a state inquiry. He says, I took responsibility and I intend to fulfill it. Meanwhile, former hostage Omer Wenkert was released from hospital earlier today, and tomorrow Israel will lay to rest Ohad Yahalomi, one of the hostages whose bodies we received back last week. He was abducted from kibbutz near Oz on the 7th of October. And finally, this last story I feel is important. It has nothing to do with Israel, but does have something to do with a community that is being persecuted, a community that is a staunch ally of many of the Jewish people around the world and of the state of Israel, and that is our beloved Christian friends. For years, Christians have been routinely persecuted across the African continent, and the media and the global political establishment are not saying a word. There is nothing coming from the United Nations. There are no calls for investigations from the world courts. World leaders are silent, and the world media is silent. But here at the Israel Brief, we are not the world media, we are the independent media, and we want to draw attention to the plight of Christians across the African continent. A few weekends ago, 70 Christians in the Democratic Republic of Congo were surrounded by ISIS-related jihadists who took them to a church and beheaded 70. This is not an isolated incident. Incidents like this have taken place in other countries across the continent, countries like Mozambique, like the Sudan, Somalia, and others. The plight of Christian communities across the African continent cannot be ignored. Every single one of us has to speak out and demand that the media covers this genocide. There is no other way to explain this other than to call it what it is, which is a genocide. The media has a disproportionate amount of focus on what is happening here in Israel with our Palestinian neighbors, a conflict that has been raging for decades. But there are many conflicts around the world, and there are many genocides around the world. And at the moment, there are tens of thousands of Christians across the African continent losing their lives on a daily basis, and we cannot be silent. So those are your top stories for today. I will now take the audience question. It comes from Kustas in Johannesburg, who asks, how do you balance peace with your neighbors and security? So this is an important question, because I don't think that we will have peace with our neighbors or security until we stop something fundamental to this whole conflict, and that is the incitement of hatred. The routine incitement of hatred that takes place in the Palestinian schools, in the media, through the generations, exacerbated by organizations like UNRWA and many others who keep driving the conflict. We saw the fruits of that incitement not just on the 7th of October, but in that horrific carnival of the grotesque, when the bodies of Kfir and Ariel Bibas and Oded Lifshitz were paraded in front of a celebrating crowd, along with what we thought at the time was the body of Shiri Bibas. Unfortunately, it was an anonymous Palestinian woman. Until we break the cycle of incitement of hate, there will be no peace with our neighbors. And this is not just pertinent to Gaza, it's also pertinent to the West Bank or Judea and Samaria as well. The reason why the Abraham Accords has legs and continues to grow and continues to flourish is because all that anti-Semitic education in textbooks, at mosques, in the media has been removed in place of talks of peace. So I think until we have an end to the incitement, that is the only way we will be able to tackle living peacefully and in security. So those are our top stories and our audience question of the day. Please don't forget to check out our website on www.layoftheland.online. Our Facebook page is at Lottle's site. Our YouTube channel is right here at the Israel Brief. We are on LinkedIn at Rolene Marks, Instagram at Rolene_Marks, X at Lay of the Land 5. And guys, God bless you. Let's use our collective voices. Let's bring them home and let's raise our voices for the plight of our Christian brothers and sisters. Until tomorrow, bye for now.